gives me great pleasure to welcome you to this seminar today on gender equity, women work and the economy, the business case.
If women were fully utilised, it would add, I believe, $11 billion to the economy. Now in Australia, female participation in education is ranked number 1 in the world. However, when it comes to labour participation rates of women, we rank 39th. When you look at companies that are doing a good job, if you go back 20 years, those organisations, the banks, have been recruiting 50% women at graduate level. And yet, at partnership or senior executive level, they struggle to maintain 20%. One of the major unconscious biases in many of the organisations we work with is the perception that people who work flexibly are not serious about their career or they're not committed. But in many cases, the problem is deeper than that. The problem is it's a developmental bias. That allocation of meaty, chunky, challenging tasks go disproportionately to men over women.
So we're now talking about diversity and inclusion. 17% of our partners are female. Some of this started to get a bit more sort of business edge when we were facing the war for talent before the GFC, and so suddenly the fact that you weren't retaining enough people full stop was a problem, and the fact that you weren't retaining enough women was clearly sort of seen to be somewhere that you might go to stem that gap. So yeah, I guess we had time to refresh and sort of think about why are we not moving the dial on what we've done. We draw it up as sort of a number of cogs in a wheel that they've all got to work together, but the leadership has got to be pulling to want more diversity in their team to deliver on their outcomes, which is the piece around linking it with strategy.
Given that, as we define it, diversity means difference, and inclusion is the active and intentional things that you do around difference, it then becomes very easy to get people tasked with the stuff they need to do to create a more inclusive culture. We look at the 50-50 split around leadership and talent programs and ask ourselves the question, 50-50, if not, why not? We've announced a signature initiative around flexibility called All Roles Flex. So by this time next week, actually by the 31st of March, all jobs in Telstra will be flexible jobs. If we can continue to tie a story about diversity and inclusion into creating a more values-led organisation and delivering on our purpose, it is actually, it's kind of like diversity nirvana.
One of the things we're now realising is that affirmative action isn't necessarily influence or being taken seriously, and so we've got to make sure that all of these structures that we've set in place are meaningful.
We're all told, don't worry, these women, they're all so meritorious, they all will get there inevitably, and then you'll take over the world. So we're still waiting. What we need to do is stop trying to fix the women. Most of us are leaning in so far that we're falling over, right? So it's the profession that needs to adapt and expand and reform. And I think those models that have served us not so well for decades need to be blown open in terms of how we qualify for practice in our biologically prime years, how we relate to our colleagues, the levels of decency in the workplace. How do you say we want a more decent workplace full of respect? Why do we not have that? And I suggest we don't have that. It's because it's not coming from the top. It's sort of flavour of the month at the moment, this unconscious bias factor, but it is, and it remains true, that we all instinctively, as an aspect of our ability to survive and flourish as human beings, act on unconscious biases.
Yeah, how can we start to really lean into some of these issues? Flexibility is critical for all of the diversity and inclusion agendas that we're focusing on. I'm not going to argue the case for why we do this. The why is because we know it leads to high levels of engagement for individuals, high levels of performance for individuals, better team performance and overall organisational performance. And it is just the right thing to do.
So these things that encourage workforce participation actually are all coming down to dollars and cents without long-term economic forecasting of the value of women in the workforce.
If you focus on that piece around how do you create an inclusive workplace that allows people to give of their very best, then I think you're going to hit at the core of that. It almost becomes an either or, and it shouldn't be. The reality is this is about inclusion for everyone.
There are a couple of norms, which Liz talks about, and they're very deeply held views, and you know, we kind of love them as a society. The first one is the ideal worker, male, generally white, available 24/7, and this norm clashes exquisitely with the other norm that we have, which is about what a good mother looks like. If we're about fixing workplaces rather than fixing women or any particular group, we'll actually get systemic change happening, which is where the focus needs to be.
The reality is it comes down to leadership and how do you create the opportunities for more flexibility and engagement.
The thing that I'm excited by and hopeful for is the proactivism of progressive employers.
This is a huge conversation, but really our attitude to women generally has to shift so far, because we cop this, and this is a barrage that confronts us every day about who we are and our worth. That's the conversation we have to start.